Hi, you're listening to Single and Mighty. I am Carmel Ecker, and I'm here with my co-host, Lindsay Carlson. And today we are talking to Kris Jones, who is a single mother by choice. This is a really interesting conversation because there aren't many people who make the choice to have a child on their own, like completely on their own. I admittedly don't know if I could have made that choice. I don't know about you, Lindsay.
That would be a hard one. I can't imagine having that choice in front of me because you would want so much to have the child if that's where your heart was. But it's a really hard journey to choose. So someone who chooses that journey has to be pretty darn brave. And I think that's what we really liked about the interview with Kris Jones. She showed us in quite a few different ways that she's made some brave choices that not everyone would actually make. And they've worked out okay.
Yeah, and they're brave, but they're also calculated. Like you get the sense that she is a very calculated person. And I don't say that in a judgmental, like a negative way. Like she is methodical, very intentional with how she lives her life. And she makes really powerful choices as a result.
You're right. And she did some things that it opened up my thinking when we were talking to her, and she talked about buying houses and selling them and fixing them up and changing where she lived, even moving to a different country. All of these are things that she's done with her son. It just kind of challenged my thinking about my comfort zone and what's possible in my life. So it was a useful interview to me.
Yeah. And I really like how she challenged my own idea of like, what's hard? Like you said, oh gosh, that just seems like such a hard journey to take. And yet talking to her, I was like, oh, actually, maybe it's not that hard. Like she just sets this beautiful example of making choices and doing what needs to be done. And she's living such a beautiful life with her son, full of choices, full of financial abundance, just such an inspiration.
Yeah, I really think it's a good show for people who are looking at what they really want to do in the world and thinking, oh, it's really hard. It's really challenging. Because I think what Kris did was saw the opportunities in the hard stuff. And I think this would be a really great show to encourage anyone who's in that position.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And also for anyone who, like you said, like listening to themselves, encouragement to actually listen to yourself. What do you want? What do you really want? Stop listening to the negative voices in your head that are telling you you're not allowed to have that, or it's too hard or whatever. Trusting in ourselves. It can be so hard.
And break some rules. I mean, I think she said like her grandma taught her about entrepreneurship, and she decided to have a child on her own. And, thinking outside the box is really where we're at with this one. That's great. Mm-hmm. So without further ado, here's Kris Jones.
2, 1.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really, really happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you.
And the first question that we always like to ask is, what's your story?
That could go a million different directions. In relation to being a single parent?
Yeah.
So essentially, I always knew that I wanted to be a mom. And as I entered into my 30s, I knew that at some point I'm going to feel like I'm ready. And then as each year went on, I wasn't feeling ready. And I think part of it was the relationships that I was in. I had 2 significant relationships in my 30s, and both of them with incredible human beings that I loved deeply. But for whatever reason, wasn't ready to move into that next phase of commitment with them. It sounds like it was happening at the same time, but it wasn't. It was like my first half of my 30s and then the second half of my 30s. So it just didn't feel right. And then all of a sudden it's like I'm 39 and I'm like, okay, I should really start feeling like ready to pull the trigger now. And what happened was essentially, I think fundamentally the relationship wasn't right. And I did not want to start a family without that feeling of really certainty and optimism about where the relationship was going to go. And so we amicably parted ways and, are still in really have a good relationship with each other today. But what happened after that was really, I got ridiculously clear that like, oh my gosh, somehow I feel ready now. But, do the math. How do you make that happen when you're not partnered and when you're 40? It's right. Like, okay, and oddly enough, it was kind of like that perfect recipe where I'm like, I had my full freedom and I was feeling grounded again and back to myself again and really healthy. And it was like the idea of having a child on my own, which I had never considered before, all of a sudden felt like, I don't know if you know that term, like a whole body yes, but I felt it through on a cellular level. It was like, yes, like now I feel ready. And now this really bizarre, uncommon way of getting to become a parent feels like the most right path for me. And so once I got that clarity, which it didn't take long, I think it happened all in a matter of like 24 hours where it was like, the clouds parted and it was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. And
wow.
now I just need to figure out how. And so what happened was, it was long enough ago that like Meetup was a thing. I had never really used Meetup before, but I got on there and there was a Single Moms by Choice group that was very, very inactive. But I got, looped into an event that they were having. And again, it was like a really divinely guided experience where a handful of women, there's probably 10 of us, all met at a coffee shop. All of us lived in Portland. All of us were wanting to get pregnant. All of us were unpartnered. And there was this immediate, like, soul deep kinship and connection with these people that was like, oh, this is like kind of my tribe. These are my tribe. These are my people. And there were just people in that group that I knew that we were going to be lifelong friends. It was so strange and so extraordinary. And so what happened was we all linked up on Facebook. We created this little micro group on Facebook that was like 8 of us. And we walked each other through the journey together. And now we literally all have kids that are between 3 and 5. Wow. And we celebrate holidays. We're doing Mother's Day together. We have Easter egg hunts together. And it was like this dream and this vision has really come into reality. And I when I think about the journey, I think about how I couldn't have done it without those people who have now become some of my dearest friends. Yeah. So that's how it all came about.
That's incredible. Wow. Lucky you. What an amazing story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I wouldn't have, it's better than I would have even have imagined, because it is, it's a gargantuan thing to do on your own. And the beauty of my journey was that I never, ever had to do it alone. And then the other cool thing about this, so the Facebook group that we started between the 8 of us, that was just such a lifeline, because the process of becoming pregnant on your own, it's a marathon. There are wins and there are losses. It is not hey, like I'm going in and I'm getting pregnant. It can take years. And so what I didn't realize is that how many other women in Portland, which is not a huge city, but it's a good sized city, but within a matter of a year or two, the group was private, but I kept getting requests of people that wanted to join. Yeah. And, we just let anybody in who was on the journey or kind of thinking about the path. And now it's like over a couple hundred people are on there just in Portland that are wanting to go down this road. So it's been really neat. Yeah.
I love how you said, you were never alone. And I think that when people make that choice to have a child on their own, or they're thinking about it, one of the things that stops them is that fear that, oh my God, I'm going to be doing this all on my own. Can I really do it? And, your story so clearly illustrates that even if you're not partnered, it doesn't have to mean that you're doing it alone. There's all kinds of different forms of support out there in the world to help us raise our kids.
Totally. And, I think one of the things that I really learned is that I had to create that for myself. So I have a lot of longtime friends, but none of them were going through the journey. And although they were supportive, like it does really take somebody who understands the journey to understand the nuances of it. And so I was talking to a good friend of mine who she's a lesbian and she's married and she went through IVF and has 2 twin girls. And she was kind of giving me some guidance. She's really, really wise. And she's like, it's kind of like you're coming out of the closet in a way. She's like, back when she was in Santa Barbara when she came out of the closet. And she's like, I didn't know anyone who was gay. Like it was just not common. And she's like, one day I just decided like, I need to know that there are other people out there like me. So she went to a gay bar and she's like, I just sat in a booth and I just looked around and I said, oh, she's like me. She's like me. She's like me.
Wow.
And I think she's the one that encouraged me to go on Meetup. She's like, you need to find your tribe, girl. Like you gotta find other people that are doing this. And that's probably the best advice that I got. Changed the trajectory of my life for sure. But I think, it's true for all humans. It's just, we need to find people that we can really relate to no matter what we're going through.
And that's really the dream. Like the whole sales pitch for marriage is to find the person to do life with. And there's just so many other out of the box ways to have people to do life with. It sounds like you've really stuck close with your community. And yeah, it sounds amazing that you're connected on such a soul level. I love that. So amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So how is life as a business owner with, I'm sure, lots of demands on your time and a 4-year-old? Even though you have this amazing community, you are the only one beside the bathtub at night, for example.
That's true. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. I have a business and I have a couple rental properties and I have a son, and there's just a million things to kind of keep track of in any given day. And, work can be really intense. And then I pick up my son at between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. He's in aftercare at his preschool. And, and so it's, it's just, you figure it out. We're so much stronger than we think we are. And the gift of Jude for me has just been the ability to prioritize and let go of the things that I thought I needed to do that I really don't do. I read this book called Essentialism. Not sure if you guys are familiar with that.
That's a great book.
To me, like, yeah, I read that like in bed when Jude was nursing. He was like 3 months old, and I was like, it was like the clouds parted. I'm like, this is the answer. And just letting go of the stuff that, you know, is kind of have to do, and just only focus on those essentials. Really helped me. I still struggle with it. You know, I write down all the things that I think I have to do still. And then I circle the ones that I absolutely have to do. And I try and just focus on those. But I've taken courses in this approach called Monday Hour One. That's all about how to calendar. And that's been great. Like what I learned, I think it was actually a different book than Essentialism, but if you don't plan your time, other people will fill it up for you. Okay. And so it's just, everything has become a lot more intentional. And I actually changed my business model. I was doing website design, branding work, and messaging work, and each project would take between 1 and 3 months. And it's just, you know, I think that the thing about me is I don't enjoy the project management piece. I love the deep creative work. But so I shifted gears, and I kind of changed my business model to operate more in a VIP day model. So I go all in super deep on a VIP day with a client. And then at the end of the day, we're basically done. And that really was a game changer for me as far as just being able to manage parenting my son and taking good care of my clients in a way that wasn't, you know, overwhelming.
That is taking full responsibility for your calendar, full responsibility for what your days look like. And I think a lot of us are afraid to do that, because anytime we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else, and vice versa. And so it's getting really clear on what is it that I want my days, my life to look like, and then creating that calendar and being really strict with it.
Yes.
And it sounds like that's what you've done. You've set up this really beautiful, ideal calendar for yourself, and it's given you that joy, that freedom to be able to balance the different parts of your life.
Exactly. And really to be able to see like what's going on overall. Like I have it color coded. So it's like personal stuff, family stuff, work stuff. Yes. And it's like, you know, it's nice to have all three colors throughout the week. But yeah, initially it really freaked me out to look at my calendar and be like, oh my good God, every 15 minutes is accounted for. Right. But now I'm like, this is really just a guide. You know, I'm in charge. I have the freedom to adjust this. Yes, I want to be strict with it, but I really had to remind myself that these are guidelines. This is a guide. And because I started to do things where I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm behind because I'm not keeping up with what I had planned for the day. And then it's like, no, this is for me. Like I created it for me. It's not supposed to be another thing to make me feel like I should be doing this or I should be getting done with this. It's like guardrails for the day and for your life. Actually, it's like that's what ends up happening.
I love that. That's fantastic. I just finished reading the book Essentialism because I'm hopping into running my own business again. I'm in the first year of doing that again. And I am feeling that overwhelm and all the opportunities and all the possibilities. And the lifeline that I've had has been somebody taught me early on to say no to so many things. Just don't give yourself that space. Make sure that you don't commit to too many things until you figure things out. And that's been the one thing. So I love hearing the results a few years down the road for you of how much peace that brought into your life and the scheduling. That's fantastic. You mentioned earlier that you have a couple of rental properties too. I mean, I think it's important for women or solo people to really take accountability for their financial health and their financial future as well. Some people wait to partner up in order to make those big plans and those big investments. I'm really, really curious. Like, how did you get into? When did you realize that you wanted to do this investing on your own, and how did that all come about?
That's such a good question. My grandmother was big into real estate. I think she really enjoyed it. She owned some apartment buildings. And I think maybe I got inspired by her. I have a vivid memory of playing Monopoly at my neighbor's house as a kid and getting pummeled. Like, I was like 2 years younger than all the people I was playing with. And I was like, oh, this is never going to happen again. Like, I got to buy the property. So as I got older, I bought my first house when I was 30. And it's been a very organic unfolding, like becoming a landlord and owning property. Essentially, my rule is I just don't sell. I just keep buying and I don't sell things because, especially in Portland, the property values just keep going up and it's such a desirable place to live. And I think it was less driven with like building, some kind of a real estate empire and more driven by my love of design and wanting to remodel and make things beautiful. So I found my home at 30. I remodeled it. I loved every minute of the remodel. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready for my next project. And had another remodel project to do. So I bought this second house. And I thought, maybe someone would want to rent the first house instead of me having to sell it. And I put it up there and immediately realized that I could make that work. It was a lot of just testing it out, because the reality was the worst thing that could happen was that I sell the house. And so then I moved into my second house, rented the first house, and then I did the same thing again. Moved into my third house, remodeled that, rented the second house, and then I've done it a couple more times. So essentially, in hindsight, I have this nice passive revenue that keeps coming in. And I've been really lucky with good tenants and stuff, but it's been very organic. And I've lived in every house that I've ever owned. I've lived in and lovingly restored it. And then I'm like, okay, ready for my new project. Although I just bought a property a year ago that I'm living in now. And this is the one that I'm like, oh, I could really live here till I die. I just love it. I think that in all the remodeling that I have been doing with every house, I was trying to create what I'm in, which is a contemporary, modern, light-filled space. But I happen to be buying these 1920s homes and wanting them to be modern. So yeah, now I'm like, okay, I'm content. I'm happy where I'm at.
Beautiful. I know, just looking at the wall behind you, I don't know if it's wallpaper, it's gorgeous and so creative and different. You can see that you bring your joy into that.
Yes. Yeah. A little bit of happiness in the background wall. It's wallpaper.
It's so cool. Yeah. I'll have to I'm going to get into the wallpaper thing soon. I'm so inspired by
photowall.com.
Oh, neat.
You can upload an image to it. You'll get ready for hours of looking at beautiful walls.
Hours of searching. Ooh, that's pretty.
Yeah. Right? But you got to have your fun projects. That's so neat. I love hearing about that story. And I think it's also really helpful for people to see it's just sort of the slow burn, one after another, a little project after another, and how it adds up over a few years. So it's fantastic.
I also love that it's something that you were passionate about. It wasn't just an investment, but you actually enjoyed the process of purchasing, remodeling, preparing a home for yourself and also the people who would eventually rent it later on. So I think there's something to be said for listening to that part of yourself. I'd really like to do this. This would be fun. And not getting too caught up in any possible negative voices or fear of, you easily could have been like, wow, well, I don't know. This is a bit of a risk. I'm going to own 2 places and who knows what's going to happen with the market. But you just went, no, this is worst case scenario. I sell one of them.
Right. Yeah. The last property I bought, the one that I'm in now, was a stretch for me financially. So a lot of fear came up around it. Like, can I afford this? And, especially like I'm the breadwinner, right? It's just like, there's no, consistent, I'm the breadwinner and I have to drum up my own clients every month. So there's a lot of unknowns around it. But one of my friends, as I was kind of considering the purchase, she's like, it's great to think about worst case scenario for sure. Like, what's the worst that could happen? She's like, but have you spent time considering what's the best thing that could happen? I had never really done that before. And that really helped like get me out of, that fear mindset and think about like, okay, what is the best thing that could happen? I could love it. I could love it so much. I could maybe find it easy to afford it. I could want to be there for the rest of my life. I could, make it this beautiful home. And the reality is, this space is perfection for Jude and me. And we needed that space. Like we really we needed to be able to spread out a little bit. So now that he's 4, it's like it's perfection.
Oh, I'm so excited for you and Jude. It's wonderful. I know when we moved into the house that we're in right now, it was much bigger and it had more space. And my daughter was in kindergarten. And I just could imagine the next 5 or 10 years of her growing up in this beautiful, bright space. And it just felt so much better. It's just, our spaces matter. And I don't know if we give ourselves the right to think that way. It's expensive. Real estate markets can be crazy and scary, but whatever we can do to create that beauty and that feeling of this is where I want to be, it's so important when we do that, isn't it?
It's so, so incredibly important. And a lot of like creatives are sensitive to that, but it's really true for all kinds of people, whether you're conscious of it or not. And it doesn't have to be an expensive thing. Like for me, what I value is like modern architecture and a lot of light. And so like I've learned and the more decisions I've made, like what I value around space and how it feels. And it's funny, I like, even now when I travel, I think about the architecture of that city. Like, okay, what is the architecture there? Where could I stay? What kind of space would feel really unique or different or inspiring to me too? So Airbnb, wow. Like, you can kind of play around with like, what are the properties you're looking at Airbnb that are like, yes, like, is it in the middle of a forest or is it, it's a fun way to kind of research what you like and what you respond to. And now I'm like, I don't know. And there are no apologies for it. Like it matters to me. The space matters whether I'm living in it or staying somewhere. And so I want to make sure it feels good.
I love that. I feel like we could do a whole new podcast all about creating your space. A room of one's own, right? So good.
Yes, totally.
And it's about knowing yourself, right? Knowing what's really important to you, which kind of comes back to what you were saying earlier about, essentialism and making those, they feel sometimes like they're tough choices because there's, opportunity here, opportunity there, opportunity here. And if you say no to this opportunity, there's that potential FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Oh, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And we just got to tap into that self-knowing of what's right for me. Like what's right for you, it sounds like is probably not what's right for me. I value compact spaces and living in a place that's convenient for all the things. I love things that are in walking distance. I love things that are in biking distance. So, that's my knowing about myself. So I love that you figured out, and it may have been over time, what was really important to you. And you've managed to land in this beautiful space that is so functional, as well as, I don't know, I get the sense that it's fulfilling for you as well.
100%. 100%. Yeah, that's so true. I'm a big believer of like micro tests, like little dipping your toe into things. By the way, I'm a huge fan of walkability. Like any day I can not be in my car, I'm so happy.
Yes.
So the convenience, and I love the challenge of being in a small space and having everything have kind of dual purpose and have it feel big because, it works for your needs. But yeah, even the way I ended up where I am here was just a test. Like I wanted to see what it felt like to live in Mexico. So Jude and I went to Mexico for a couple months and just got a feel for it. And I was open to like, maybe I'll stay longer. Maybe I'll just stay the 2 months. And then I came back to Portland and I had rented my house out while I was gone. And the people that rented it wanted to stay there a couple extra months. So I'm like, I'm fine. Jude and I will find a short-term rental in the Pearl. I have always been curious about what it would be like to live like urban, like in the heart of the city. And so we found a short-term rental, 3 months. And within it was like 24 or 48 hours, I called my landlord and I was like, oh, we want to extend the lease. Like I'm not going back to that other house that I loved dearly. But it was like, just when I think about it, it was like, I wouldn't have been here had I not tried out Mexico, had I not been open to a short-term rental. And it was getting to actually experience things in a very kind of uncommitted way and just like a trial scenario that helped me kind of find a place that really feels good to me.
Wow. It sounds like you've really figured out how to make those decisions by testing the waters, and you're like following your curiosity and being open. And it's such a Jedi mind that you're approaching life with. I'm just so inspired by that. It's the perfect conversation for me today. And I bet to lots of the people listening are also, it's so easy to get stuck in what we're told to do, what we're supposed to do, the way we're supposed to grow a business or live a life. And you've kind of broken all the rules. And it seems like it's turning out beautifully.
Thank you. Thanks.
And I would add to that, Lindsay, that we get comfortable, right? We get comfortable with what we've always done. And it can be really hard to break out of that pattern. And it's so awesome that you've been able to break that pattern repeatedly to create the life that you want.
Yeah.
That's true. Thank you. Yeah. It is. I mean, it's so easy to get comfortable, especially when you're a single parent, because, you've already got a lot on your plate. And so it's kind of like often the path of least resistance is what we take. And I do it all the time. What's easy? And that's a really valid question too. That's a really valid question.
So how do you break away from that question of, well, okay, what's the least path, the path of least resistance, trying to find the words, that path of least resistance, and instead choosing something different that might be more work, but also could be more fulfilling. is there a mental cue or how do you do that?
Well, I think it's fun to dream, for sure. But the path the one I'm talking about now, as far as like going to Mexico and then doing a short-term rental in Portland and like that whole thing, ultimately it's like just solving problems. I had a 1-year-old who all the daycares in Portland, are booked. And so I was really struggling with finding consistent care for him. I was on the waiting list of like 5 different daycares. And as he was getting older and walking and, I was like, I'm not going through another winter with a toddler in Portland, Oregon. I'm just not. So how can I solve this problem? And, through a lot of, exploration, came up with the idea of like, hey, let's go to Mexico, somewhere warm, sunny. And my whole priority with Mexico was it has to be walkable. I don't want to be in cars or taxis. It has to be family friendly. It's got to be warm. I've got to be able to hire support that's really affordable. I need to be able to work from there. Like I didn't take on a lot of work during that time, but I needed to maintain the clients that I had. Yeah. And so San Miguel de Allende like kind of answered all those questions, and they have this beautiful, it's kind of like Mexico meets Europe. These beautiful cobblestone streets and this gorgeous cathedral in the middle of town where mariachi bands are singing all day long and balloons and like the culture loves children. Like I would have waiters pick Jude up and take him from table to table and take orders, and like they just love on their kids so much culturally, and parades every other day, which Jude still talks about. He was only 1.5 years at the time. But all that to say, I was solving a problem in a creative way and thinking outside the box. And then ironically, like the day before I left for Mexico, I got a call from the dream daycare that I like put Jude on the waiting list the day after he was born for. I was like, it's called Child Peace. I love this school. They called, they're like, we have an opening. And I was like, well, I'm leaving the country for 3 months. But I'm in. Count me in. So essentially, essentially the day we got back, he started with them, and it was a really nice re-entry. And I had planned the short-term rental that I was in. I had coordinated it for walkability to his preschool. So that's still where we are. We just walk to school and from school every day, which is a big value for me. Yeah. And so creative problem solving, thinking outside the box with problems like that. Yeah. Yeah. Or like, somebody could have come back to the States and my house wasn't available. Like there were people in there that wanted to stay longer. And it's like, you kind of look at that 2 different ways. But I really, truly was like, this is an opportunity for me to try something new that I would never be motivated to try had I just been happy and comfy in the house that I'd lived in for years and years. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Make yourself a little uncomfortable and see what you come up with. That's so fun, Kris. I love it.
But I love that idea of seeing an opportunity in what could be considered a less than ideal situation.
Totally. Total inconvenience.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So we've covered so many things, and it's just been so interesting to get to know you and hear your story. And it makes sense. I mean, it all comes together in this great package of someone who's led by their curiosity and their joy in life. I love that. Is there anything we haven't asked you or we haven't covered that you'd love to add?
Oh gosh, nothing that I can think of. Carmel, do you have any other questions?
I've really enjoyed hearing your story, and the question that keeps coming up for me is like, how did you get this way?
Yeah, that's right. That's me too. How can I be more like you?
a little bit. Yeah. Because what comes to the surface for me, is that it seems like you have, at least in, since your 30s, been able to really tap into that inner wisdom. Like you knew that the relationships you were in were not the ones that were going to go the distance, or they weren't ideal for you, that you've always kind of had this knowing that when it's right, you go, okay, yeah, this is right. And I don't know, do you still second guess yourself, or do you just have that hit of knowing and you're like, okay, this is it. Here we go.
Yeah.
I think it is a work in progress. Like it's always, I think as I get older, I'm getting better at it for sure. You're just continuing to gather information about yourself and learn new things and try out different things. But I think fundamentally, I think like the path of the entrepreneur for me, it was like, that was the only path for me. And I'd been kind of starting my own thing and trying to sell, like at the age of 8, I was making perfume and selling that to my neighborhood. And like, just this idea of creating and, in my, like, and not being confined by, the traditional, like, hamster wheel of, our culture. Like there's this kind of way of living that we buy into, that you hop on and you start like creating debt for yourself, and then you have to work harder to maintain that debt. And then, you want to have security of health insurance and stuff. So you stay employed, even though it's not the right fit, because it's safe. And then you get a lot of validation from people that you should stay there because, it's like, it's scary to do your own thing. But for me, like I learned in my 20s that like that path for me, and there's no judgment on it. I mean, some people are really wired for that, and it feels right to them and fulfilling. And, it's, as long as it feels right for you, then that's where you need to be. But for me, I knew that type of like cubicle living or cubicle life for me would little by little just kill my soul. And so it became clear, like early on, like this is the only path for me. And it felt so good. It just felt so good that it was just undeniable to kind of keep navigating down that path. Yeah. And I think, there's all kinds of ideas around why my life unfolded the way it did. But I think fundamentally it does come back to just the curiosity and the ability to kind of just test things out in a very safe way. And play around with like what feels exciting, what feels like really good for me, and then following that.
Yeah, the idea of putting those little challenges in your path is really a great thing to take away from this, right? If there's something that might appeal to you, what's a simple little way, like a short-term rental, of testing that out and feeling what it feels like. That's really actionable and lovely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or if you've always wanted to move to Philadelphia, like go there for the weekend. Don't, just feel it out, or go there for a month, see what it's like to live in Philadelphia. What's the coffee shop that you love, and get to know, the people in that neighborhood. It's like, I think we often like live, just stay in the town that we grew up in. And there's, again, no judgment around that. I've totally done that. Like I grew up in Portland. I still live in Portland. But I think the more traveling that I've done, the more I appreciate Portland. Mm-hmm. And I think often people get kind of stuck in these comfort comfortable areas and forget that, like, if you've got a dream to, like, live in Mexico or New Orleans or whatever, like, try it, go there for a month, see what it's like. And then all of a sudden, like, it's not such a big decision. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Half the job is done because you've taken the hard step of just doing a little bit. Yeah. I really like that.
Yeah. And then you have the clarity. Then you're like, no. Like for me in San Miguel, I loved every minute of being there, but it was like, this is not a place that I'll live, but it's a wonderful place that I'll continue to visit.
Yeah. We're gonna have some show notes, and I think linking up San Miguel and the other things that you've talked about, I think that'd be really valuable for people to dig into. Beautiful. We have some lightning round questions, so we'll hop over there and get ready. So
do you have a sound effect that we can?
Oh, you are so
weave
fun.
in, like da-da-da, da-da-da. Some kind of lightning round.
That. Let me see. Give me 12 seconds. You're challenging, but I do have something here. Okay, ready? We're going to try cheering, and I have to change the settings, but don't worry, nobody can hear all this. Okay. Okay. Ready? Going live. 1, 2. This is clapping and cheering. I love it. It's so fun.
We all need clapping and cheering.
Yeah. All right. We have a lightning round for you. Kris Jones, Carmel, you've got the first question. Cue it up.
Okay. I like this. What's the book? Because I love to read and I listen to a lot of Audible. What's the book that's had the biggest impact on you?
Well, I mean, the one that comes to mind is Essentialism, but we already talked about that. And I would say second to that, the book that I give out the most is a book called Conversations with God. It really shifted my mind around spirituality and kind of the more traditional church that I grew up in.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. I like this one. What's your favorite activity these days to do just for you? Is it decorating new houses or is there something else?
Actually, you are right on. We need a clapping and a cheering sound for that. It's decorating my own place. It's like been such a wonderful labor of love, true love, is just moving into this space a year ago now, April, and little by little making design decisions that just feel so, that just make it home for me.
Beautiful.
Wonderful. Yeah. You're kind of making me feel like I need to take a look at my house because I don't pay much attention to the design and stuff of my house. So I feel like, oh, maybe I need to pay more attention to that. What is the best piece of advice or the worst piece of advice, you get to choose, that you've ever gotten?
Oh, okay. Let me narrow it down. I'll say that I've ever gotten around parenting.
All right.
Okay. So the best one was get help. So prior to Jude being born, I hired a postpartum doula to literally be there for me when I came home from the hospital. And she was there every other night for 3 months. And she taught me like how to change a diaper, how to there's so much to learn on top of just, figuring out all the other things. So it allowed me to get sleep during those first 3 months. And, but it was such good advice. And the other one was what I mentioned before, was just kind of find your tribe of people who are doing the same thing that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay, I think this is the last one. Do you have any traditions or rituals that you and Jude have just for the two of you as your family rituals?
We, every Saturday, we don't plan anything. We have the full day. It's just the two of us. And we do a lot of things, but it's very organic. We do what we feel like in the morning, in the moment. And it's such a nice contrast to the week. And I just look forward to it. So it's just kind of a go with the flow kind of day. Yeah. And then as the other thing that we do every day, which I also adore, because like it's just time for us together, but it's nourishing to me, is that I have this sauna blanket. I've always been big into saunas, but not everybody can put a sauna in their house. So I bought this sauna blanket. There's so many health benefits to saunaing, and it's basically a blanket that's an infrared sauna, and it's really, like having your own sauna, but in a blanket. So It's part of our morning routine. I wake him up, and then he gets dressed, and then he watches a few minutes of videos on the bed with me while I'm in that little sauna blanket. And it's like, I think for me, like figuring out ways to integrate routines that are beneficial for both of us, but they're not major, like little routines. Like I play the ukulele while he gets dressed, and that means I get to practice, and I don't have to sit there and be like, put your pants on, put your shirt on. Like I'm taking care of what might be frustrating for me. I'm like distracting myself from that. And I'm little by little getting better at playing the ukulele. So, just those little routines have kind of, I'm constantly like trying to fine tune and figure out little ways to make the day-to-day more fun and enjoyable.
I love it. Playing the ukulele while he gets dressed. Got to keep that one at my sleeve. So fun.
Yeah. Yep. Go for it. I dare you. Let's learn a song about it.
That's so fun.
We'll have a little
thank you
ukulele
so
band
much.
together.
Right? There you go. Our next podcast. Join us for the three of us playing ukulele in the morning.
Yes. Let's do it.
And some lullaby club singing from Carmel.
Yeah. I want to hear this lullaby from Carmel.
Oh, maybe at some point. It wasn't actually a lullaby. It was Lullaby Club. And I think I sang a Jewel song, didn't I?
I don't remember, but it was so lovely. Like I just was like, I don't even know what it could have been. Twinkle, twinkle, little star for all I cared. But it was just like, clearly she's brave enough to do it, even though she's clearly like a little bit nervous, and it was so melodic and beautiful. And I was just like, wow, I have to know who this is. So partly it was the vulnerability of doing it anyways, when you're in front of all those people, and a lot of them are professionals, and just being like, I'm just going to do it. That was really impressive.
Yeah. There are professional musicians in that group that play. Yeah. And so, there's like little me.
Yeah.
That's amazing. The power of music. And you had the courage to share your gift, and look what happened. Now you're doing this podcast.
I know. Who knew? It's, and comes down to the small, sometimes it's the small, seemingly inconsequential decisions that we make that end up having these big impacts, and we just never know. So do the thing. Always do the thing.
Do the thing.
I love it. Awesome. Well, Kris, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like we need a little bit more of this.
Yay, more applause.
It's been a pleasure to learn from how you do life. It's just been lovely to see how things have gone in your world.
Thank you so much. It was such a joy to be here, and I love what you guys are doing, and I'm a big fan. So thank you for including me.
Our pleasure. All right. Well, we will link to all of your links and share all your sharing things on the show notes. So people do check into that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Before you leave, we want to give a big shout out to our friend and musician, Laura Kosh, who wrote our intro/outro music. Laura is the singer-songwriter for the band The Quirks, and you can find them online at The Quirks, KWERKS.com.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other single parents in your life. Thanks for listening.